The Treaty of Versailles, a winner-takes-all peace.
On June 28, 1919, Hermann Mueller and Johannes Bell signed the Treaty of Versailles as representatives of Germany. They were not part of the negotiations and had to sign regardless of their objections. Many of the articles were very problematic and became a catalyst for World War II. Articles 27 through 117 redefined the borders of Germany. Germany lost 13% of its land and 10% of its population. This map shows the areas that Germany lost due to the Treaty of Versailles. Articles 159 to 202 dealt with the military. These articles limited the number of men that could be in the military, as well as the number and types of munitions that Germany could have. Germany could have no more than 100,000 soldiers in the army, 15,000 soldiers in the navy, and were prohibited from having an air force at all. Article 231, which became known as the War Guilt Clause, held Germany responsible for the entirety of the war. Articles 227 to 230 explained how the reparations would be handled, with Germany owing 60 million in gold marks. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, they forged ahead on rebuilding their navy. Hitler unilaterally broke the short-lived Anglo-German naval agreement in 1935. Germany began building modern battleships and other surface combatants. The KMS Bismarck and Tripsit were the largest battleships ever built by the German Navy and rivaled or exceeded that of any European power. They were well armored and carried powerful 15-inch long-range guns, as well as the latest technology, including early radar. These formidable dreadnoughts, however, had limited impact on the war. Both were sunk by the British Navy. In early 1939, Hitler ordered the expansion of the Kriegsmarine, known as Plan Z, to challenge the naval power of Great Britain. This plan sought naval parity by 1948. It called for a massive buildup to include 10 modern battleships, 4 aircraft carriers, and long-range cruisers. However, with the invasion of Poland in September of 1939, little progress had been made on Plan Z, and funds and efforts were redirected towards the buildup of the submarine force. The buildup of the Luftwaffe included the design of many new planes. The Junkers, also known as the Ju-87 Stuka, was designed in 1934, with the prototype built in Sweden and smuggled into Germany. The Stuka was first flown in 1935 and was a central component in Germany's Blitzkrieg operations as a dive bomber and ground support aircraft. The Stuka was used in every German operational theater. Frequently referred to as one of the best fighter planes of World War II, the Messerschmitt Bf-109 made its first flight in 1935. The Bf-109 was designed as a short-range interceptor, and the first armed version flew in mid-1936. Its high speed and maneuverability endeared it to the pilots who flew it. However, its limited range became an issue of great importance during the Battle of Britain. The HE-111 first flew in 1935 with Germany's intent to use it as a strategic bomber, with later models modified to become torpedo bombers, reconnaissance aircraft, transports, and even glider tugs. The FW-200 Condor was designed as a long-range airliner in 1936. It was used as an anti-shipping aircraft for performing long-range search-and-destroy missions against Allied ships crossing the Atlantic. The rebuilding of the Great German Army. While the Treaty of Versailles designated how many troops could be in the army and how many officers the army could have, it did not specify who could and could not lead this new army known as the Reichswehr. General Johannes von Schecht, who was the last chief of the Imperial German staff, became the commander of the Reichswehr. Under his leadership, he established committees to study the lessons of the First World War. In these committees, the Reichswehr developed many of the tactics and techniques they would employ successfully during the Second World War. She also set up a screening to retain the best qualified soldiers as officers and NCOs. Lastly, to increase the number of trained soldiers, General von Schicht supported the training and equipping of police and border forces in a paramilitary fashion, gaining an additional 100,000 troops. In 1922, seeking to escape diplomatic isolation imposed by the Treaty of Versailles, the Weimar Republic signed the Treaty of Rapallo, which allowed for secret military training. In 1922, the German arms company Krupp established an artillery plant in Rostov-on-Don, and German officers and soldiers also began training at the Red Army Tank School in Kazan starting in 1926. With the Nazi rise to power in 1933, Adolf Hitler immediately mobilized the German industrial base towards rearmament. Initially reluctant to outright challenge the Western Allies, the Nazi leader would wait until March 1935 to reintroduce conscription. Once secure in the weakness of the Allies, Hitler then set about a rapid expansion program in both men and armaments. In the course of this expansion, the German army grew from the Reichswehr's 7 infantry divisions and 3 cavalry divisions to 66 divisions by the invasion of Poland. After focusing much of their time on the rearmament of the military, it was time for Germany to rearm themselves nationally. This meant regaining territory they had lost in the Treaty of Versailles. The first country that Hitler looked towards was Austria. In 1938, the Germans annexed Austria. This is known as the Anschluss. Austrians welcomed the Anschluss with parades and little resistance. Part of this was a result of the strong fascist movements that Austria was already having before 1938. Along with Hitler, several high-ranking Nazis were from Austria, like Kaltenbrunner and Golbknecht. Hitler waited for there to be a response by the international community, but nothing happened. Many countries felt that Germany had a legitimate right to annex Austria, and not wanting to go to war, they instituted a policy of appeasement. Hitler continued his expansion of Germany, eyeing the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. The Sudetenland had close to 3 million ethnic Germans. Germany prepared plans for the eventual takeover of the region. In order to avoid war, the major powers of Great Britain, France, Germany, and Italy met in Munich to discuss appeasement. In the end, Germany was granted control over the Sudetenland at the expense of Czechoslovakia, and might I add, without them even being invited to the meeting. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain was delighted that they were able to avoid a war, and when he landed back in Britain, holding the agreement, he stated,
"Of the Czechoslovakian problem, which has now been achieved, is, in my view, only the prelude to a larger settlement in which all Europe may find peace."
Peace was not achieved by the Munich Agreement, and on September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Just 2 days later, Great Britain and France declared war on Germany.